Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. Today's guest is Mr. Whiskey, a U.S. Navy veteran, speaker, author, preacher, comedian, addiction recovery coach, and the founder of the Couple Old Nukes podcast. Through honest and often difficult conversations, he tackles topics many people avoid, including mental health, addiction recovery, faith, trauma, leadership, and rebuilding life after hardship. Drawing from his own experiences in the military, ministry, and recovery, Mr. Whiskey is committed to helping people discover that healing, responsibility, and purpose are possible even after life's darkest season. Mr. Whiskey, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm always grateful for every opportunity to cultivate life lessons, to have conversation and spread an impact, especially to, as you mentioned, the young adults who I'd like to get information to, especially that our look back can be their look forward so that they can avoid going through a lot of the hardships that we've had to.
I said, yeah, thank you for the work you're doing, right? And I want us to, dive deep into your story, right? So, first of all, take us back to your 20s, right? Who were you during that season of your life, and what kind of future did you imagine for yourself and all?
Yeah, so full transparency, I'm still in my 20s, so the work that I've done, a lot of people think I'm a lot older than I am. And part of that is because I grew up in a household of control, abuse, addiction, domestic violence, sexual violence, verbal and emotional abuse, and religious weaponization. And those kinds of situations cause you to grow up fast on the inside and sometimes the outside too. Luckily, I kept my youthful appearance to some degree, but between that and the military, you really are kind of growing up a lot faster. The military does hold your hand through some things, so to speak, about adulting, but in general, you're more on your own. And, I grew up very outcasted and isolated. And so because of those hardships, I've been living a lot of life at a very young age. And so now I do a lot of things, international speaker, preacher, comedian, podcaster, and I travel around and I've been exposed to a lot of very adult things. But what you'll find out is a lot of these hardships that we talk about, they start in childhood and they especially are impactful during the young adult years. So I think it's really important that we address that. My 20s has not been what I thought it would look like at all. I never expected to be on podcasts, to be on stage, to perform comedy shows, to travel the world. I don't know what I expected, but not to be doing this, especially to be working in some of the stuff I do, suicide prevention, addiction recovery, the prevention awareness of domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. But it's a great privilege. And what I share from scripture is, God says to Jeremiah and to Timothy in both of these passages of scripture, there's this idea of never say you are too young. And the Bible on the flip side also says never say you're too old. You know, with man it's impossible, with God all things are possible. We all have a calling in our life, and it's regardless of age. I've interviewed people on my podcast who in their 70s hiked the Appalachian Trail and got sober from, decades of addiction. And I've talked to some young entrepreneurs who are in college still, younger than me, doing great things, creating applications on phones to help people with their medical health. I mean, it is never too late or too early to start. It's all about leaning into that calling and purpose and passion.
Hmm. Wow. All right. So, yeah, thank you. And, it just reminds me of how strong we are in our 20s, especially our generation, right? I mean, nobody wants to, go through all the things that we've mentioned, right? But regardless, we went through it and we came out strong. And now we're trying to help people. That is what I really admire about our 20s, basically. So, yes, I want us to, go back to, yeah, when you were in the army at 17. So, what motivated that decision, and how did military shape the young man you are or you were becoming?
For sure. So that was not really my personal desire. My parents at 17 said, "You're doing this," and kind of made me do it, sign the paperwork. And unfortunately, other options got tight when at that same exact time COVID came into the world. And so it was a very, time of turmoil where the working world suddenly disappeared. What was going on with colleges, online, hybrid, shutdown, quarantine this, quarantine that. It was a crazy time for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people lost their 20s because of that. There's people who lost their high school experience. I didn't go to graduation. I didn't have prom. I didn't have yearbook, right? That was right as COVID hit. So, a lot of people were affected by that. And so the military shaped my young adult years. I think part of the issue is so many young adults get thrown into the military at such a young age. They're not given proper mentorship. A lot of them, it's their first time leaving their hometown or their state, and it can be a shock. I would say it is a huge cultural shock. And I would say on the bad side, I wasn't prepared for living with other people from other parts of the world and other parts of America. On the bright side, though, I would say it does open your eyes to more life. Being in the military did take me to new states. I met people from Africa, from Mexico, from Hawaii, from Alaska, from different parts of the US, and I got to experience different cultures that growing up in this small, controlling, abusive bubble in New Jersey, I had not. And so I will say it did start my journey of, really opening my mind. And post-military, I've expanded that. I'm currently in Japan right now traveling, so it's actually almost midnight here. And, so I'm traveling in Japan. I've been to some other countries and across most of the US, and it's really expanded my mind. It's changed the way, I interact and see people of different races, see different countries, see different cultures, and I think that is one of the benefits of the military. Of course, there's still an Americanness, to the military. And so I think it's good to step outside of that as well, whether you're stationed somewhere foreign or if you're going to travel afterward, because you can have a skewed perspective. But I think it did help open my mind up as a stepping stone to new possibilities. On the other side, it set me up for what do I want to do when I get out? And, that was really shaped by God, but I think it's really important. A lot of my friends who got out, in their early 20s had no plan. Their plan was just get out of the military. I don't care what I do. I'll go work at McDonald's. I'll work at Walmart. I just don't want to be here. And that's great to celebrate that freedom of independence, of many opportunities. But a lot of them ended up jumping job to job to job, whether it's college, the military, leaving home, a gap year, whatever it may be. I think a lot of young adults fail because they don't plan. They just rush into it thinking everything will line up. And planning, is so important. Doing the research. If you want to start a company, whether you want to go into a job, a field, I think it's on us to do a lot of research, not just the first thing that pops up on Google, not just what your guidance counselor said, not what your parents suggested. Actually take the time, dedicate the time to really research. People don't want to spend a few more minutes or a few days researching what's going to dictate possibly the rest of their life. And I made a lot of mistakes as an entrepreneur because I didn't research and I just rushed and I had to redo a lot of stuff. And I've wasted a lot of time, money, and energy and sleep redoing stuff that if I had just set up a better foundation could have been much greater.
Oh, okay. So, the lesson we can take from this is before you jump into anything, make sure you research, right? It helps you be more prepared, basically. So, and like they say, proper planning prevents poor performance, right? So, yeah, and I'd like to ask, right, looking back, what do you think was like the hardest truth you had to learn, or should I say the hardest lesson you had to learn at, during that phase of your life?
For sure, I think the biggest factor in my 20s so far has been discernment of people, of businesses, of opportunities. Not everything is in alignment with you. Not everything that looks sparkly is actually sparkly, right? There's been a lot of people who have betrayed me, a lot of business deals that fell through. There's been a lot of opportunities I've tried to give people. The number one thing is to invest in yourself. And I say that as someone who invests in others, who invests in nonprofits and businesses and other people, right? But there comes a point where are you helping people with their dream Or are you just paying and putting all your energy into their dreams and neglecting your own? And I think there's a key discernment there. And I think it's really important. I've tried to help a lot of people in the same age range as me, either younger, older, or same age range, to live more fulfilled lives because they'll complain about all this stuff and I'll give them all these opportunities and they don't take them or they don't pursue them or they neglect them. And I think it's important to focus on yourself during this time to build that strong foundation. I'm not saying don't help serve others. I do that all the time, right? It's important to help serve, but there's a discernment with it. Not everyone is your friend, not everyone is your enemy, not every opportunity is aligned. And a lot of us, we're just hot to trot to take all the community we can have, like a podcast, for example. I want every guest I can possibly have. Well, no, you know what? Some people aren't good guests. Some people aren't aligned with your brand identity. Some people aren't aligned with your moral compass, whatever it may be. Not every show that wants you to guest on their podcast is a good fit. Not every friend who says, hey, I'm going to start up this business. I think you should invest and be a part of it. It's not always a good collaboration. So I think a discernment of opportunities is so important. But sometimes we're so desperate or so excited for new opportunities that we don't discern. You know, I've spent a lot of money going to every conference. You know what? Not every conference was necessary or that important. You know, we need to really focus where we put our time and energy and money. Because when we're in our 20s, we're like, I can do everything. I can handle it. And it's not about if you can handle it. It's about is it effective, right? I've handled plenty of sleepless nights, all-nighters of, you know, all these financial strains, all these hardships with different business deals and collaborations and alignments. But the thing is, it was unnecessary. And that's resources and time and all kinds of stuff that could have gone to bigger and better projects for the future. So I think discernment, if I had to put one word, discernment is the most important part of navigating all of this. And discernment can be learned, right? Discernment is both a very emotional thing, but it's a very spiritual thing, and it's also a very knowledgeable thing. A lot of it came with experience, but a lot of that experience was because I wasn't slowing down. I think slowing down is a huge part of discernment. We throw discernment to the wind because we're like, I just want to take this opportunity. Slow down. And the thing is, if slowing down loses that opportunity, a lot of times it wasn't a good opportunity to begin with. Slow down. It doesn't have to be forever, but slow down and actually, again, research. And research isn't just about looking up, you know, information. It's about figuring out people and companies and alignment and opportunities. So discernment, research, and slowing down, I think, are three very fundamental things that we often neglect, abuse, or don't implement into our lives.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Whiskey. I'm already learning a lot. I think I even need to write that down, right? Discernment, research, and slowing down. Right. Okay. So, yes, I want us to talk about your journey and mission. And while you were talking, I remembered, I have a podcast, right? Apart from Conversations with Sekani, I recently opened a podcast and it's based on the philosophy of Kintsugi. And surprisingly, you're in Japan. I'm hoping you must have heard of it before, right? So it's a Japan philosophy, right? Where broken potteries are, put together by, gold and just put
Right.
together basically. And it looks really beautiful. The funny thing is the vase was broken, right? It could have been tossed away, it could have been, washed away or something, but they decided to put it together using gold and it just makes it look even beautiful. So I'm trying to picture that in human form, right?
Mm.
You, for instance, you mentioned you've been through a lot of, traumatic experiences, right? That is enough to break someone. But regardless, you're not broken, right? Instead, it made you who you are today, right? Although nobody had to, go through that, but you went through it regardless, and you're here trying to help people. You've made a beautiful clay pot out of your situation, right? And now people might even be looking up to you. Because personally, I like to say I love that you're very knowledgeable. So I'm looking up to you, right? So yes, let's talk about your journey, right? So your childhood and military experiences, it exposed you to trauma, addiction, and broken leadership. Right. So how did those experiences influence the work you're doing today?
For sure. Now, Kinski is a very interesting subject in my life because it was introduced to me by my ex-fiance at the premise that our broken relationship could be repaired and beautiful. Unfortunately, we are not together, and so it didn't work out. But she was the one who introduced that to me, and it has been very reflective in the embodiment of my life. Like you mentioned, there was a lot of routes I could have taken. I could have went through all that, and I could have just thrown myself into addiction, into escapism. I could have buried it all and never addressed it. I've gone out of my way to help people going through the same stuff. And yes, for me as a man of faith, it's a moral obligation. But ultimately, we have free will. And I could have chosen, hey, I don't care if other people are going through this. I don't want to talk about this stuff. I don't want to remember this stuff. But the subtitle I used to have for my podcast was Rebuilding Our Dreams and Rebranding Our Lives. Because life is going to cause us to have to pivot. It's going to cause us to have to do this. A lot of people and I think the word victim is all right. A lot of people say, don't be a victim. Victim is bad. I think there is a time and place and a part of your life where you are a victim. But it's that transition from victim to survivor to thrival that is important. If you stay victim past, right? Like you're supposed to be a senior in high school at some point. But if you're a super senior, you didn't graduate on time, right? That's what it's like. And I'm not trying to say that it's a graduation, but victim to survivor is a transition where you say, listen, this happened. As you mentioned, we can't change it, but we can cultivate life lessons from it. And we can use that to help others for prevention, intervention, and recovery. Those are the three things I focus on. I'd love to do only prevention. I'd love to prevent all of this. But the fact is, most people in the generations below me, my generation, the many generations above me, we've all been through stuff already. And it's hard because you need a lot of large societal and generational changes to really impact prevention. But we can work in intervention and recovery. And so all that stuff shaped it because I witnessed it up close and personally. I had to stop suicides. I stopped a homicide suicide. I talked to people who were on the edge of suicide, of committing suicide. I talked to people who were in the midst of addiction. I've interviewed people, not just on the podcast, but in my own home growing up and in my own family and in the military, people I served with who were depressed, anxious, dealing with PTSD, not just combat PTSD, but just PTSD from life. Right? It's a traumatic experience that changes the way we are physically and mentally and spiritually. And so seeing all that, witnessing all that, I had a calling to help serve others, to the point of just that was all I did. And I had to get stopped and confronted. And I share this lesson not to, diminish my value, but to say I got stopped because I was neglecting my own health. And I was not sleeping, eating. I was not eating. I was coughing up blood. I was working 24/7. I would stay up every night till 2 a.m. I would sleep for like 2, 3 hours, then get back to work. And someone stopped me and said, Mr. Whiskey, even Superman couldn't save everyone, right? And what they were saying is, we got to help as many people as we can, but we can't burn ourselves out because then we're of no use. And when we're not at 100%, it's hard for us to give 100% to people. And we can push past our limits, but only for a time. So being in the midst of all that really taught me, my mission is to serve and help people. In fact, it comes straight from scripture. In Ecclesiastes 12, it says, there is but one purpose in life. This is the conclusion of the matter, to serve and worship God. And a huge part of that is serving others, right? We are called to help one another. Yeshua says to us, the least you did for those among you, you did for me, right? We are called to serve one another. And I think that our experiences can really amplify that, right? That's what we go through, right? Taking that broken pottery and filling it in with gold, saying, not only does it still have value, but it can be more valuable than it was in a different way, a unique way. All of us are unique. Even if we are all born human, the same clay pot, right? We're all shaped a little differently. And our hardships shape us all differently. Because you can drop two vases in the same exact way, but they'll break differently, right? And that's the part that we got to look at and how it's repaired whether that's with glue or silver or gold. That's kind of up to us how we come out of that hardship and the people around us, the community and support we have. So everything shaped me to just be more knowledgeable to help people. And I think that's what we all need to do is say, what have I been through? What can I take away from this? I can't change it, but I can have the ability and I have the power to dictate what do I take out of this? And the goal is to take out as much of it as we can in the most positive and impactful way that we can.
Oh, all right. So yes, thank you, Mr. Whiskey, for sharing that beautiful insight with us. And I'm glad you also know about kintsugi, right? So yeah, you often speak about healing alongside responsibility. So how can someone acknowledge their pain without allowing it to define their future?
I believe that there can be no healing without accountability and acceptance. You have to acknowledge what happened because when you're trying to avoid it and bury it, either it comes out violently or in subconscious or subtle ways or destructive habits, or it pushes you to escapism, which leads to addiction, whether that's video games, TV, pornography, drugs, alcohol, whatever, relationships, work, even. So it's really important to acknowledge it and accept it. And for everyone, that's at a different level. For some of us, we need to address those memories at a slower pace, or we need to, some people, we can address it right then and there. I think knowing thyself and understanding that mental health is individualized. Our experiences can be the same, but again, as I mentioned earlier, you and I right now could go through the same thing and be affected by it differently. How it affects us is completely differently. And so how we heal is differently too, right? That's why there's so many different ways of addiction recovery, because if 12-step worked for everyone, then that's what we would do. But some people need a different approach. It's the same with all of this. Some people I'll give a great example, sexual violence. Some people have reached out to their perpetrator and forgiven them and formed a relationship with them. Some people have pushed to lock up their perpetrator. Everyone's healing path is different, and we can come together as a society and say, this is right and this is wrong. And what is it for you? And what do you need to accept it? Do you need to spend time writing about it? Do you need to spend time listening to podcasts that address the subject? Do you need to talk to someone about it? I think acceptance is really figuring out what you need. And it's not going to be you just wake up and you know what you need. Sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's exploration. Sometimes it's researching and studying different healing tactics. But you have to find out what really syncs with you. And I truly believe there is a path of healing for all of us, no matter what we've been through. It's just about, again, I mentioned earlier, discernment and alignment. What is going to heal you? Don't just do stuff to appease others, right? And that's the difference between I've interviewed people who have gone to rehab for addiction multiple times, and they said it failed the first 4 times. It worked the fifth time because the fifth time I wanted it, right? You have to want and accept it in order for the healing to work. So many people say the healing's not working because you've blocked off its ability to work because you're still in denial, you're still trying to escape, you're still whatever it is. And so you need to have that accountability of others, of yourself, and that acceptance in order to get the full healing.
Mm, wow. Oh, all right. Like you said, accountability and acceptance, then you also need to want it. You need to want to heal. That way you actually get to heal, right? And another thing that played a major role in your life, right, is faith, right? So how did your relationship with God evolve through your hardest seasons?
Right. So, like any believer, there was definitely periods of doubt, periods of struggle, but the full abandonment of God is not something that I've really turned to in many, many years because I believe that, God at the end of the day, I know for a fact he exists and I know he's real and I've had a personal encounter and everything. The thing is, if you leave God, then what do you have? Now you have your hardship and nothing. But when you have God, you have this reassurance of hope of the other side of the hardship. And I think it's really important. Faith has played a huge part in in patience, in acceptance, in accountability, in hope, in peace, in all of these things. The Bible, the Word, is the antidote to a lot of the hardships of the world. It doesn't prevent everything because here's the deal: we have to follow the Word, and not everyone does, and you can't make everyone follow the Word. And so it'll never be full prevention unless everyone followed the Word. And then we'd have a great life. But we don't. We have people who are wicked, people who are selfish, people who hurt others for enjoyment. But in the word, you find past prevention, you find intervention and recovery, as I mentioned earlier. You find the antidote to all these things, to all these afflictions, to the anxiety, to the depression, to the PTSD, to your sleep, to your health, to all of this. And part of that is acceptance of not just what has happened, but of the reasons you cannot understand. One of my favorite historical accounts in the Bible is Job, where God says to Job, "Brace yourself like a man, for now I shall ask you all these things." And it's a very long talk between Job and God, where God is listing all these, factors of the universe that he's running. And when you look at that, when you look at that huge cosmic picture, for a lot of us, it's really humbling because we think about how many things are we trying to manage in our life right now, and we're behind on half of them. We're burnt out. We're trying to juggle all these different responsibilities, work-life balance, balancing our relationship, our family, our job. Imagine doing that on that cosmic level for everyone and everything, not just humans, plants, animals, weather, everything. And I think when you look at that, you instantly understand, hopefully, that there are things well beyond our understanding. I think humility and acceptance that we don't know and understand everything is difficult. But for me, that has been the biggest part of healing. It's I can't give you the exact reason that, this raping happened or that this cancer happened or that this addiction happened. There's not a way to fully justify it because I don't have all the knowledge of it. But there is a God who does. And so resting in that reassurance that everything is happening for a reason, and also understanding that humanity has to be held accountable for the actions. So many people want to blame all the hardships on God when we have free will. All right. The people are choosing this. People always want to say, why does God allow this to happen? Instead of asking the question, why do people choose to do this? If a war happens, people say, why does God allow this? Not, well, why did this president start a war? Or why did this president start a war? Or this dictator, this leader? If a raping happens, people will say, why would God allow this to happen to that poor innocent woman? Well, why did that guy choose to do that? He has free will. He had no obligation or anything forcing him to do that. All right. So I think it's really important to understand that there's a sense of accountability for humanity and a humility that we need to have in order to understand. When you have that, I think there's a greater hope than a trust in that reasoning beyond our understanding that makes everything not justified because we don't have the list of reasons, but a reassurance that everything is happening for a reason. And I think the longer I've lived and the more I've looked back, the more everything has lined up in ways to only further prove that.
Oh, all right. So yes, thank you, Mr. Whiskey, for that one, actually. And you mentioned something, right? There are people who hurt people for fun. I'd like to say this to the listeners. There are also people who hurt people and they are not aware that they hurt people, right? And Hmm. This
Mm,
one is from personal experiences, right? There are some certain things that unknowingly I do. I never knew hurt people that much. Till they did it to me, right? And I realized how hurtful it was. So I believe there are people out
mm,
there probably in the same situation. If you realize you've hurt people before, it's best to, reach out, apologize, and I don't know what advice to give regarding that. I just wanted to say that out loud. So, if you realize you've hurt people, reach out, apologize to them, and try your best to, change, right? Change your ways. And we are all doing life for the first time. That's what people say. Like, we are doing life for the first time, and learning is lifelong. So, as long as we are alive, we are all learning. whether you're in your 20s or in your 80s, right? We are all learning. What matters is we try to do the right thing, right? And yes, we're talking about faith. Personally, I remember speaking with a guest that said, I don't know if you'd agree with this, right? But I remember speaking with a guest that said faith is actually very important, right? Whether you believe in God or you believe in something else, it's just very important because there'll be a phase in your life where you actually need to believe in something, right? And it would help you because it's almost look like that's the only thing you can believe in, right? So that is where faith comes in. You can personally, I believe in God because He has come true for me a whole lot of times, right? There are times where you're depressed, you can pray, and then you feel this joy that comes almost immediately, right? So personally, I believe in God. So I urge anyone out there, faith is actually really important, especially if you're in a phase now where you're probably going through something. I think you should try praying, and yeah, it will work personally because it works for me. So yeah, I would advise anyone out there to, do that too, right? And another thing is many people carry emotional wounds in silence, right? Because they are afraid of being judged. So, what would you say to someone who is probably struggling but doesn't know how to ask for help?
For sure. And I think it's really sad that we have people who think that pride or shame is more important than your life, more important than getting the healing that you need, getting the mental health help you need, the physical help that you need. I understand there's a lot of social constructs that, people are gonna think I'm weak. People are gonna say I'm not a real man, or, as expected of a woman, or they'll blame it on my race, my gender, whatever it is. And the thing is, the truth is, you can never make everyone happy. If you get help, there's going to be people who support you and encourage you. And there's going to be people who look down on you and make fun of you. And that's going to be for everything. If you start a business, it's going to be the same thing. If you start a podcast, it's going to be the same thing. If you decide to change your major in college, it's going to be the same thing. Don't worry about the people supporting you or hating on you. Worry about what do you need. I think this is the one time where I say be selfish, right? No one cares about our health more than us. People are going to use any reason they can to make some kind of judgment about it. I don't care. I'd rather you be alive and a little embarrassed about some guy on the internet thinks you're weak, or maybe a family member said something, then take care of yourself. In fact, in the military, this is especially prominent because there's another level of pride. I knew people who, went to the brink of suicide because they rather stay in or commit suicide than have to walk home, quote, in shame. And I think the fact that we care so much about what other people think that we would let it cost our lives sometimes is truly sad. And I think that's first and foremost why God tells you to love yourself, that you're made in his image, and that you're a beloved child of him, and not to worry about what the world says about you, only what he says about you. Because I think having that anchor is so important. And I think the issue is so many people don't have self-love. They are chasing after validation online, on social media, from their family, from their communities. And I understand it. I'm human too. Of course, I prefer when people are proud of me or supporting me, but I've also made plenty of choices where I was alone, where no one supported me, and that's okay because my choices are mine and I have to live with the consequences, whether good or bad. And if the consequences are keeping me alive or healing, that's more important to me. And that's really important for people to understand. Sometimes healing requires you to cut people out of your life. And that's just the sad truth about it. Sometimes we have people in our life who are dragging us down, who are toxic individuals. Sometimes, as you mentioned, they're not aware of how they're impacting your life. Sometimes you're not aware of how they're impacting your life. But here's what matters most: you getting your healing and you staying alive. And so I know that's a bit firm and not the soft, cushiony talk, but it's the truth. Be selfish about your mental health and your physical health, not in a way that you hurt others, but in the sense that you don't care what other people think. If you're going to go talk to a therapist, talk to a therapist. If you're going to go talk to, a religious counselor or a person of faith, go do that. if you're going to journal or write poetry, go do that. Don't worry about what other people think because there's always going to be people who don't like you. There's always going to be people who do like you. Just worry about, do you like you and are you doing what you need to do?
Like you said, worry about if you like yourself, right? And whatever decision you're making, make sure it's for your own good, right? You need to be selfish in situations like that because at the end of the day, the only person you have is yourself, right? So you need to make conscious decisions to become better. Right. And yes, I want us to take, I know personally, I've learned a lot from our conversations, right? But I want us to take life lessons from this conversation. You know, more realistically speaking, it's easy to, give advice. But there are people currently in the situation where we have been, and we know better that it is tough, right? There are people currently struggling with addiction, trauma, failure, recovery also, right? So, what do you think one can do to, keep progress, right? What do you think they can do when they're in that situation to help them, feel better, right? Because we all know when you're in that situation, it's tougher, right? And progress feels very slow. So what do you think are like daily habits or practices that one can begin today to help us thrive in situations like that?
For sure. So it's all about starting the day right. So I know a lot of
Mm.
people say this, but it's because it's so important and necessary. Starting the day with gratitude. Every morning, I thank God, whether I'm happy with him or not. Sometimes I'm not the most happy with him, right? But I thank him for my life, for my health, for waking up, for the day. And it's really important to say, let's try to make the most of the day, whatever the circumstances are. We have to. Now, I think one thing that I don't always remember, but the older I get and the more life I live, the easier it's to see. There's so many people in hardship are living with what I call the horse blinders on. They're just focused on this tunnel vision, the short term. We need to look at the bigger picture. We need to take that step back and see. And one thing that I've really come to learn is there are going to be so many opportunities we never expected. There are things we can't even think of that are going to happen in our life that are good. And, when we're feeling suicidal or we're in addiction or we're hopeless, we don't see anything. We only see the bad that is to come in the future, let alone the good opportunities. Even more so, we don't see the unexpected opportunities. I've had stuff, even just while traveling in Japan, stuff has popped up to really elevate my career or to give me a great opportunity to do something or be part of a community that I never expected. I never planned for it. It just happened. And if many years ago I had, committed suicide, for example, I wouldn't be making the impact I am now. I wouldn't be doing everything. I never expected to have a podcast. There are things planned for us in our life that we don't even see coming. We could never even think about. And so I think it's really important to know that I believe there is no hopelessness. I believe that hopelessness is just blindness. It's when we are focused on just the short term, the present, and all these things. But real sight is seeing or being open to seeing stuff that we can't see. And it sounds very paradoxical, but that's what it is. So I think it's important to maintain hope daily. And there are plenty of practices you can do to help boost that. Listening to personal testimonies, listening to podcasts, reading stories, constantly reminding yourself because it's an inundation battle. We are being inundated by mainstream media, social media, by our community about bad news, about hardships, about our issues. You need to actively combat that by constantly filling yourself with positive news, whether it's scripture, whether it's good stories, whether it's testimonies, to remind yourself that, hey, we're constantly being fed this negative narrative. But we need to stop focusing on that. We need to focus on the positive narrative. And that doesn't mean the positive narrative is perfect. It doesn't mean that it's not without hardship, but we need to set our sight on that. And we need to remind ourselves daily, whether it's through some kind of gratitude practice, if it's not praying, it could be journaling, that there's things to be grateful for yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We need to look at the good news, look at the good opportunities, think about good opportunities that may happen in the future, we need to combat that negative down spiral. And it can be hard. Negative down spirals are powerful. I think, in my personal opinion, it's easier to down spiral negatively than it is to go uphill positively. And that's why I think it's so important that every day we are pushing uphill in that positive direction to combat that negative down spiral. And some days are worse than others. And it's about, again, knowing yourself. On those days that are worse than others, what can I do to mitigate this negativity even more strongly? On top of the daily practice, what additional things do I need to do to help mitigate this extra negativity? It's knowing that, hey, this situation is happening that's going to push me to the brink of suicide or drinking. I need to combat this now, or preemptively if you could do it ahead of time. So I think, again, it comes with knowing yourself, but also knowing life is not just negative. There's so much positive to it. We just get so focused in that tunnel vision.
Oh, all right. So yes, thank you, Mr. Whiskey, for sharing that beautiful insight with us actually. And finally, right, I would like to ask, looking ahead, what impact do you hope to make, or should I say create in your with your ministry, your podcast, and what message would you have on the next generation?
For sure. So those three words I mentioned earlier, prevention, intervention, recovery. It's about making that impact, as you mentioned. I talked about the negative down spiral and the positive inundation, being part of that positive inundation, hosting episodes where people can see the recovery, people can hear the testimony, where people can see that this is real. This isn't just me making up some narrative that is fictional. I have interviewed hundreds of people who have gone through things, some of them way worse than my life, and they have come out very successful. It's about providing that platform because prevention and awareness starts with conversation, and having these conversations is key to helping people look ahead, helping people look currently, and helping people look back, and doing so with a new perspective. So through podcasting, preaching, speaking, comedy, and writing, those are all just different mediums of communication to reach different people. My goal is to just be a farmer of God, to plant the seeds, right? He's going to bring them to fruition in the right time and place. For me, it's not about witnessing the conversion. It's not about the validation that I changed their life. It's about putting this out there for God to take to who needs it at the right time in the right place. So the episode might not reach someone today, it might reach someone after I've passed away. But the point is that it reached them at the right time in the right place for the right person. I like to quote all the time, planting the seeds of a tree whose shade we will never sit under, right? It's not about me seeing the tree grow. It's not about me having a picnic under its shade. It's about setting it up for future generations to enjoy.
I would like to rephrase on that. Sorry, can you rephrase again? Planting the seed of the
We're planting the seeds of a tree whose shade we will never sit under.
hmm. Wow, that is powerful. Now I've seen what I'm going to tell my next guest. Right. Okay, so yes, thank you, Mr. Whiskey. This has been amazing, absolutely. And yes, it brings me to the final segment of my podcast. I call it the rapid fire segment. You could
Oh
either
no.
answer with a word or a phrase, starting now. So, what is one word that describes your 20s, even though you're in your 20s, by the way?
Growth.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. So, what is a Bible verse that's carried you during the difficult season?
Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit.
Hmm. Okay. So, would you prefer coffee or energy drink?
Neither. Don't drink any of those. And if you're listening, stop drinking both of those. They're terrible for you.
All right. So, water. Water is fine. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, what is one daily habit you never skip?
Going to the bathroom.
Wow, I feel like nobody skips that actually. It's nature's call, by the way. All
Right.
right, and yeah, so finally, what is one piece of advice that you'd give to any young adult today?
To tune into the Conversations with Sekani podcast.
Oh, thank you for that one. All right. So yes, thank you, Mr. Whiskey. This has been absolutely powerful, right? And your story is a reminder that our past doesn't have to determine our future, right? Through faith, accountability, and the courage to face difficult conversations, it's possible to find healing, purpose, and hope again. Right. So, yes, finally, before you go, where can people, get to learn more about you and also connect with you?
For sure. So coupleonukes.com. That's COUPLEONUKES. Coupleonukes.com. You can find my podcast. You'll find the episodes organized into different sections to easily find what kind of content you want to consume. Every show I've ever been on, every guest who's ever been on my show, and their resources. Then my comedy, speaking, different books. So just a ton of resources, the ministry as well, for you to take in to hopefully learn something or share with others if it's, for some reason, if you feel like it's just not speaking to you. I think we all have the power to not just learn for ourselves, but we're learning for others and we're sharing with others to make an impact.
Oh, okay. So yes, thank you, Mr. Whiskey. And I'm going to put the links in the show notes so it's easily accessible for listeners, right? And to my listeners, I would like to say thanks for tuning in to Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked something in you, just as it did in me, make sure to share to someone you think might need this and also subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. Once again, thank you, Mr. Whiskey. And if you don't mind, I would like to invite you for my other podcast. It's called What Didn't Break Me, where you get to share your story.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunities. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Take care, Mr. Whiskey.